We face the constant problem that people look at document retrieval or information retrieval as basically just a technical problem. It far transcends just a technical problem. It has an awful lot to do with understanding kind of the practices that went into making the document, the practices you want to make to use the document, why you're trying to find these documents, has to do with the communities of practice that produce them. There are all kinds of kind of social and cultural factors that come into play here as well. So you might think, well, Google has solved every problem, or the universities doing classical information retrieval have solved all the problems. And they barely scratched the surface. Yeah, they find a lot of the documents that you need, but what happens when they miss a critical document? Missing critical documents, or missing documents that turn out to be critical, is much more costly often than basically finding too many documents. So you have to kind of balance what do you want. But you really can't find that magic sweet spot by just technology alone. And it's been that actually surprising to many people, not that much progress. You need technology, but you also need to be able to model the practices of why you need to find this document. If it's an auditing document, it may actually be a key piece of evidence or something. You need to know the practices of auditing. Otherwise, you can't kind of make sense of what this information is about. It's not just one piece of information. Now, one piece of information may be critical, but it's only critical relative to other kinds of things in that document that suddenly are forming the practice that you need to know about in order to know that this is just a little bit off the mark. This is not a normal practice in accounting to have done it quite this way. And that turns out to be the information. For example, many of the key pieces of information you may be searching for are things that are actually missing. It was the absence of information that tells you more about it than the presence of information. So if you're going to find the absence of something, you have to understand the practices around how that information should have been used or why it should have been there. So I think we've got to realize that information retrieval is much more of a problem-solving, sense-making, creative act. It is not just a question of doing keyword scans to find what you think might be useful. But I think it's important to realize that when you talk about cost effectiveness of any kind of retrieval scheme, you got to think about what's the cost of missing the critical document. The killer issue to me is, in a lot of work that I can imagine, in a lot of work in the intelligence community, you just don't want to miss the critical piece of information that makes the case completely fall together. Well, I think the advantage of the H5 approach comes out in terms of finding you the documents that most techniques would actually miss. Because I think that the ability to be able to model the practices that produced that document helps you make sense of the document in ways that just looking at keywords or collections of keywords can't.